As we speak, we are 5 days into the Trump-triggered government shutdown, and Donald Trump's approval and general polling are collapsing out from under him. And in one specific poll, he was brutally humiliated by his TV arch nemesis, Jimmy Kimmel, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, so we got several things to look at here, but I want to start with this one because this one's actually pretty fun. You know it hits Trump where it hurts. New poll, Jimmy Kimmel clobbers Trump by 16 points in net approval. Ouch! It's like orders of magnitude apart. A new poll shows that late-night host Jimmy Kimmel is clobbering Donald Trump in net favorability after the bombshell showdown that resulted in a suspension and triumphant return for Kimmel. The media world was shaken last month by the news that ABC had suspended Kimmel's show indefinitely, just hours after he was targeted by Trump's FCC and the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr. The move drew fierce backlash from all quarters, even as Trump and his allies openly celebrated the suspension and looked for more. Fellow late-night hosts and other media figures rallied around Kimmel, and reports of mass cancellations of Disney Plus subscriptions circulated. Kimmel was reinstated after a wave of Disney Plus cancellations, but major affiliate owners, Sinclair Broadcasting and Nexstar, said they would not share the show, citing comments by Carr. Within days, both relented. The host did indeed return, and after a marathon monologue that was at times defiant, triumphant, and heartfelt, he went right back to torching Trump. And then, when the dust settled, Kimmel's net approval far outstripped Trump's. In the latest Economist YouGov poll, respondents were asked, "Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Jimmy Kimmel?" 44% responded yes versus 41% responded no, with another 15% undecided, for a net favorability of +3. So you might be thinking, well, that's not that impressive, right? So, 44% like him compared to 41 who don't. But then you got to look at what the numbers are for Trump. Respondents were also asked, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump? Trump fared far worse than Kimmel. Only 41% had favorable views of Trump versus 54% unfavorable and 5% undecided, for a net favorability of -13. That's a whopping 16-point difference in net favorability. The divide is even greater when you exclude partisanship. Among independents, Kimmel has a +5 net favorability, while Trump is -30 among independents. Ouch! Respondents to the poll overwhelmingly believe Trump is, quote, trying to limit free speech by a 54 to 36% margin. So, folks, this is brutal polling for Trump. Asked, quote, did Jimmy Kimmel say things that would justify having his show canceled? 55% responded no versus 30% who said yes, mostly Republicans. So there you have it, folks. It's a pretty brutal poll that, again, if you look at partisanship, Jimmy Kimmel's clobbering Trump by 16 points on favorability. A majority of Americans believe decisively that Donald Trump is attacking free speech, which is, of course, objectively true. But then when you exclude partisanship from it, it's orders of magnitude even worse for Trump. It's pretty humiliating. And then, of course, this is in the context of the recent government shutdown. Again, we're 5 days into it. I want to look at some polls which show that Donald Trump's approval and handling of this, not very good.
Who do Americans blame more? They blame Republicans. The New York Times, by 7 points, they blame Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump. Marist, look at that. Blame Trump and Republicans by 12 points. How about Washington Post? By a 17-point margin. When you look at the data, what you're actually seeing is that more Americans are blaming Republicans than Democrats, which I think really goes against the conventional wisdom, because a lot of folks are saying, hey, Democrats are so divided. But at this particular point, Americans are placing the blame on the Republican shoulders, at least the plurality of them are.
All right, so looking at this, does this match up to what we see historically? Like, how is this different or the same?
Yeah, this is what I think is so notable here, is we can go back over time, and this is actually a pretty familiar story. What are we talking about here? Blame more at the start of shutdowns. 95, 96, they blame the Republicans more by 16 points. 2013, blame the Republicans more by 10 points. 2018, 2019, blame the Republicans more by 14 points. And right now, on the average poll, you see that the American public are blaming Republicans more by 12 points than Democrats. So this actually lines up with what we've seen historically. When the government goes in the shutdown, at least in prior occasions, and in this one, what we see is that more Americans are likely to blame Republicans than Democrats, which again, it's why the polling right now doesn't exactly strike me as surprising, despite the fact that Democrats might be messy. Republicans are the ones who are getting more blame, because that is what has happened, at least historically.
It is. we've covered this before. The fact of the matter is that the Republican Party is, generally speaking, the government party that's more inclined towards shutdowns. Okay, CBS also has a new poll out, which is atrocious for Trump. I think they partnered with YouGov. We're going to take a look here. Poll finds CBS News poll finds few feel shutdown is worth it. Low marks for Republicans, Democrats, and Trump's handling. Okay, so for many Americans across party lines, concern over government shutdown means concern about its potential impact on the economy, among other things. Therefore, many don't think either party's position is worth having a shutdown ever. Given that, no one is looking especially good politically at the moment. Trump, congressional Democrats, and Republicans are all net negative on their handling of the shutdown thus far. Neither party is on very solid footing. Let's take a look. All of it looks to the public like another distraction from larger matters of concern. A sizable majority of the country says the Trump administration isn't focused on lowering prices, is focused too much on tariffs, and as they have been for months. Reflecting some of that, many still describe the president himself as energetic, but fewer describe him now as focused than they did at the start of his term. Okay, so Trump is, if you look specifically, and we'll get into this because Trump and Republicans are usually aggregated together since they're part of the same party. Trump has a 32% approval on the government shutdown, 52% disapproval, 16% not sure. Again, Democrats not great. They actually have a lower approval individually than Trump, but a lower disapproval as well. So more people are inclined to, say that, yeah, I'm fine with how Trump's handling this, but also more people are inclined to say, no, I'm actively disapproving of how he's handling. But when you combine it with the Republicans, as you'll see here, not good. Concern about government shutdown affecting the economy, 49%, so a decisive plurality say very concerned. 31% say somewhat concerned, and only 20% say not concerned. Then you look at, are their positions worth it? Democratic positions, worth it, 28%. Republicans, only 23%. Not worth it, 40% Democrats, 45% Republicans. In other words, Republican position on the shutdown, like the position to draw the line in the sand and say, no, we're going to go into a shutdown, fewer people think that the Republicans have a position that's worth justifying the shutdown compared to the Democrats. And this is where you look at the blame. Okay, so set approval aside, what about blaming? 39% blame Trump and Republicans in Congress, again, because they're the same party, so they operate in a unit. 30% blame the Democrats, and 31% blame both equally. So again, not great for anybody, but worse pretty decisively for Trump and the Republican Party, which is what Harry Anton was talking about. So let's see here. Among Democrats, congressional Democrats' positions worth a shutdown. 48%, again, say a plurality, say worth a shutdown. 24% say not worth a shutdown. Remember, right now the demand seems to be related to health care, right? Now, as I've mentioned before, I think the Democrats could make a compelling case if they had the right messenger to say, I'm not going to fund the government at all as long as Donald Trump is attacking free speech, attacking law firms, attacking university, violating civil liberties, unleashing mass ICE agents on the American people, sending in the National Guard and military to American cities, et cetera and so forth, the tariffs, the unconstitutional tariffs, all these things, right? But I understand that in a coalition as broad as the Democratic Party, particularly the elected party, you have to go from as conservative as Jared Golden, all the way to AOC on the progressive side. So the one thing that seems to unite them is healthcare, which polls very well for Democrats. So it makes sense that if they have to pick one issue, they're going to draw a line in the sand over the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, and Medicaid. So, not great for the Democratic Party in terms of our overall brand. 64% of the American people consider the Democratic Party weak and only 26% effective. You look at the Republican Party, about 59%, 60% say the Republican Party is extreme. Only 40% say reasonable. What's the most important issue facing the country and the economy and jobs, followed by inflation? Overseas events are down to 4%, so it's on the other side. Trump's focus on lowering prices, 75% say not enough. That's not good. This one's really bad for Trump, too. Trump's policies are making you financially worse off, according to a majority of Americans, 51%. Only 17% say better off. And if you look all the way around, his approval rating on immigration, the economy, and inflation, the biggest policy elements, not good. 69% say that he's tough. Only 60% say now. Competent, 59% in February. Only 46% say now. And his overall job rating is back to 42%, and disapproval is at 50%. It's just not good, folks. His approval rating is in the toilet, as it has been. He's the most unpopular president in modern American history. And I want to close with Dan Pfeiffer of Pod Save America, who also writes a Substack called The Message Box, which you should read. He says, the GOP has lost previous shutdown fights because the issues at stake are very unpopular, such as cutting Medicare, and defunding Obamacare. That's not the case here. Dems are fighting for something that's incredibly popular, even with Republican voters. And he's citing polling that, again, a majority of Americans, even Trump voters, are actually more aligned with Democrats when it comes to healthcare, which is, again, the kind of pivot point here, than Trump. So I don't know what will happen. Trump generally has an advantage with respect to messaging and the media environment. But right now, it's not going well for him, and he is losing the shutdown fight. But we'll see what happens in the next 2 days or so. But right now, Democrats are holding the line. And quite frankly, regardless of what the polling says, even though I do think Democrats have an obligation to play this as well as they possibly can, I think even if the polling were unfavorable, I think Democrats have to draw a line in the sand, and I'm glad they are. If Donald Trump needs Democratic votes as he does to keep the government open, then he should make important concessions to the Democratic Party. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.